we only pay out when they meet employment milestones. That's not going to happen in a year. When we go after big federal labs, same thing. We're gonna dole money out on an incremental milestone basis. Again, extreme discipline there. But what makes us unique is that we can commit the state of Kansas to make a payment beyond a fiscal year. So again, outside the appropriations process, that was obvious, but why is that so important? Growing the biosciences takes a very long-term perspective, and in being tied to an annual fiscal year appropriation or any funding mechanism that is on an annual basis, in our opinion, fundamentally ties your hands in a very important point. Now, Brian asked me about, so where are we now? I mentioned earlier, this year we are supposed to bring in $70 million. Well, the Kansas legislature capped us at 35. Is that a big deal for us? I will tell you, our relationship with the Kansas legislature is extraordinary, and you'll see why in a second. But what we projected is based upon our existing commitments and based upon what we believe will be a reasonably projected investments over the next year. 35 million made sense for us. In our FY 2011 budget, we will commit more. Again, back to the 160 versus 226. We will actually commit more than we will actually take in, and you will see that continue over time for the KBA. Our investment strategy. Really another key distinguishing point, but I will tell you, our investment strategy is made possible because of the funding mechanism. So what I'm about to describe is something that, probably in many respects I think you've heard or think or have implemented in your own organizations. What I will tell you, though, is without the flexibility of the funding mechanism, the execution of this strategy would be very difficult. First, I think it's obvious to anyone in economic development, we really emphasize areas where Kansas has an existing strength in terms of research and a corresponding strength in terms of industry clustering. So an example is animal health, which I will describe in more detail there. But very strong research infrastructure in animal health, correspondingly strong industrial clustering. Where that intersection is, that's our sweet spot. That's where we will invest. So this is not a peanut butter approach. This is not a let's invest in areas where Kansas has no research capacity or very little industrial clustering. And there are substantial amounts of data that inform just what that focus means, and I'll present that to you in the following slide. Game changing. We view ourselves as a strategic fund. We make big investments in areas that we think will fundamentally change the complexion and the stature and the vitality of the biosciences. Yes, we do make investments that are relatively small. Here I'm thinking more into early stage companies, de-risking early stage entrepreneurial ventures. But in our opinion, those are game changing. So it's game changing isn't necessarily about the total amount of funding we put toward a particular project. It's really more about the outcomes that we would associate with those projects. Diversification. All sorts of bioscience organizations all over the country. I won't give you necessarily the perspective on this. I will maybe throw in a few comments here. Some focus just on growing the research infrastructure. And I might add the entity that I ran back in Illinois mightily supported investments into the research infrastructure. Some just support commercialization. Really trying to, again, foster an economic outcome by supporting the growth of early stage ventures that may or may not arise from an academic institution or a garage. And then, of course, the expansion as well. In our opinion, though, you almost have to do all of them at once. Why? These are asset classes. We're a fund. We get different return over differing periods of time based upon investments in these three asset classes. So research by its very nature is relatively long-term. Commercialization, I might add, is relatively long-term. But expansion, and I will actually show you data on this, expansion, we got a quick hit, really quick hit. Evaluative. The KBA, again, a fund. The KBA works in a somewhat unique way. KBA staff, about 23 individuals. We have 8 deal people, people that actually vet and bring investment recommendations to our board, but only the board can actually approve investments. The board is comprised of former governor of the state of Kansas as our chair, but entrepreneurs, researchers, those that have spent a lot of time in the biosciences. Former Secretary of Agriculture Dan Glickman, for example. So individuals that are pretty capable alongside our staff to evaluate investment opportunities, but also to the strategic partner point, just like a venture fund. I mean, we want to see the success of every investment we make. So we're not a fire and forget organization. We try to build big business networks around the companies we invest. We take a long-term perspective about some of the research projects that we invest in as well. And then, of course, outcomes focused. I mean, we won't make an investment. We simply will not make an investment if we don't clearly understand what the outcomes are. And then we hold that investment accountable for the outcomes. And if they miss a milestone, we're not making a payment, period. Very unique model. It's not all money up front. And I might add, the combination of several of these factors, I think, really get us a sharpness and clarity around which investments really are going to be the most impactful. This is the graphical depiction then of that strategy. Animal health. Fully 1/3 of the global animal health industry is located in the state of Kansas in the so-called animal health corridor. I'll get into that more. Bioenergy, we're not a corn state, so this is cellulosic bioenergy. Some of the larger cellulosic companies in the United States are either located or have substantial operations in the state. Human health, that's really more drug discovery and drug delivery, to be clear. Very large CRO industry, probably rank in the top 10 in the country, the Kansas City region that is, in terms of the density and concentration of clinical research organizations. I will also always be as intellectually honest and candid as I possibly can. In our opinion, we have 2 mature industry clusters on this chart, and they're the one at the top and one at the bottom. Again, animal health, very strong concentration of firms there. Human health, particularly in drug discovery and clinical research, very strong concentration there. We have 1 emerging cluster, that's bioenergy, and we have 2 nascent clusters, that's biomaterials and plant biology. The data that underlie this, I think, is very similar to the work that I think has been done in some of the more recent reports that Brian sent me. So, this is an investment strategy that is informed, if I can put it that way, by a substantial amount of work as it relates to both the concentration of research and the concentration of industry clusters. It's also informed, to a certain extent, by what would be a perceived growth rate of those industries. And clearly, where there's already strong clustering going on, we can likely expect that to continue as well. Actually, I'll go back to this. Simply the strategy again is to invest again in the cycle of it. So it's not just one part of it, not just research, not just commercialization, not just expansion. It's the cycle. So what's the KBA fund? This is I guess the cycle, if I can put it that way. I won't hit on every single one of these. I'll mention just a few. I mentioned that research is really critical to the biosciences. I think this is a state that knows that. If anyone around here has any doubts about that, you have an absolutely massive bioscience research and development infrastructure. It is absolutely massive. We don't. And you can sort of view that world in 2 ways. You can have organic research growth, meaning you're hoping that your existing researchers are going to pull down more money, or you can grow it dynamically by recruiting scholars. This is the, well, I guess it's not actually named up there. This is the Eminent Scholar Program, where we work with academic institutions in our state to recruit distinguished researchers, sort of nationally prominent, near or in National Academy of Sciences types of individuals, but in research disciplines that we are supporting. So, animal health, plant biology, drug discovery.